In this video, I'm going to show you how to check the clutch reserve on a 2002 Ford Mustang GT according to the Ford factory manual.
The first thing you want to do is check the clutch cable for any obvious signs of wear or damage. By popping the hood, you can see the clutch cable, or at least the top portion of it, and it appears to be in good shape. You also want to check that all points of attachment are intact and secure. There are 3 points, but from this view you can only see the bulkhead connector, and that appears to be good. You'll have to get under the car to inspect the rest of the cable, and the lower portion of the cable looks to be in good shape. The second point of attachment is the cable clip, about midway down the cable, and that seems to be good too. The last point of attachment is where the cable enters the transmission. You can't see it in this view, but it's good. The next step Ford wants you to do is pointless, because the procedure they outline in step 2 is completely bogus. They want you to loosen the clutch pedal shaft nut, then pull up on the clutch pedal as high as you can. Then, while holding it in that position, retighten the nut to 30 foot-pounds. The reason this procedure is completely bogus and idiotic is because the clutch pedal lever has a squared-off hole that fits over a squared-off section of the shaft, and the very end of the shaft is turned down and threaded. So basically the nut secures the clutch pedal lever to the shaft by tightening it against the shoulder created by the squared-off section. Now 30 foot-pounds is completely adequate to secure the clutch pedal lever to the shaft, but won't do much to prevent the clutch pedal lever from rotating independently of the shaft. The squared-off hole and squared-off section of the shaft accomplish that. If you follow the procedure outlined in step 2, all you'll do is shift whatever play there is between the squared-off hole and the squared-off section of the shaft to the other side. But as soon as you step on the clutch pedal, the excess play will go right back to where it was before you conducted this procedure. If you're not convinced, go ahead and do it. It won't cause any harm. It's just a waste of time. Now, unlike step 2, which was completely pointless, step 3 is extremely important. By completing this step, not only will you be able to determine that the quadrant is working properly, you will also ensure that the cable has the proper amount of tension, and that the throwout bearing has the proper preload, which is critical for an accurate measurement of the clutch reserve. Here's the clutch pedal, and I'll follow the clutch pedal lever up to the pedal box. Now you can see the end of the clutch pedal lever shaft with the nut that I talked about in step 2. And if we go to the other end of the shaft, we'll get to the quadrant. Also at this end of the clutch shaft is the clutch shaft lever. The clutch pedal shaft lever is rigidly attached to the clutch pedal shaft. It's actually welded, as you can see here. The quadrant, however, just rides on the shaft, and it's only held in place by this R-clip. But it has 2 constraints that keep it from rotating freely: a torsion spring between the quadrant and the clutch shaft lever, and a spring-loaded pawl, which is attached to the clutch shaft lever and engages the teeth of the quadrant. And as you can see, when the clutch pedal is in its normal up position, the pawl is just touching the up stop, and its teeth are firmly engaged with the teeth of the quadrant. In fact, whenever you step on the clutch, the pawl will always be engaged with the quadrant. So basically the quadrant behaves as if it were solidly connected to the clutch lever shaft, and the pawl is what makes that solid connection. There are only 2 ways the pawl will ever disengage from the quadrant. The first way occurs automatically. As the friction plate of the clutch wears down, the fingers of the diaphragm move out, away from the flywheel, and exert force on the throwout bearing, which increases the tension of the clutch cable. The excess tension in the clutch cable causes the pedal to raise higher. When that happens, the pawl bears against the upstop and releases from the quadrant. At that instant, the quadrant can rotate independently of the clutch lever shaft. But it can't rotate freely because it is now under the tension of the torsion spring, which has one end anchored in the clutch shaft lever and the other end anchored in the quadrant. At that point, the tension in the cable is now reduced to the tension of the torsion spring, and the teeth of the pawl re-engage with the teeth of the quadrant, because the torsion spring doesn't have enough force to release the pawl from the quadrant. So basically, whenever the pawl disengages due to excess static tension in the clutch cable, the tension of the cable is reset to the tension of the torsion spring, and the pawl re-engages automatically. The beautiful thing about all this is the tension the torsion spring imparts upon the clutch release cable is the factory specified clutch throwout bearing preload. Unlike older cars, there's not supposed to be an air gap between the throwout bearing and the clutch diaphragm fingers. The throwout bearing is designed to be in constant contact with the clutch diaphragm fingers. The advantage to that is you get smoother shifting, less wear on the diaphragm fingers, and you avoid the associated wear on the bearing from the instantaneous jolt from 0 RPMs to engine RPMs every time you shift. The drawback to this setup is the throwout bearing is always spinning from the moment you start the car till the moment you turn it off. And that's gotta cause the bearing to wear out faster. But who says the throwout bearing has to last forever? It only has to last as long as the clutch. And the clutch friction disc almost always wears out before the throwout bearing. When you replace the clutch, you always install a new throwout bearing, so it's really not an issue. And there you have it. That's how the Quadrant is designed, and how it works automatically to maintain the factory specified preload on the throwout bearing. The only other way the pawl will ever release from the Quadrant is if you activate it manually. The way to do that is simply by pulling up on the clutch pedal. When you pull up on the pedal, the upstop will push the pawl away from the Quadrant, and then the whole process I described previously will occur. To sum it all up for step 3, you need to get under the dashboard and pull up on the clutch pedal until the pawl fully releases from the Quadrant. Then, while holding the pedal up so the pawl remains disengaged from the Quadrant, reach up with the other hand and rotate the Quadrant. You should be able to rotate the Quadrant independently of the clutch shaft lever, but under the tension of the torsion spring. Once you've confirmed the Quadrant is working properly, release the pedal and ensure the pawl has fully re-engaged. If everything checks out, you know the Quadrant is working properly, and the clutch linkage is now adjusted to factory specs. Now that you've completed these preliminary steps, you can go ahead and measure the clutch reserve.
The next step is to take a tape measure and run your tape measure through your steering wheel. Put a wire tie and put your wire tie through the nail slot of your tape measure. Then take your tape measure, hook it under your clutch pedal, take your wire tie and secure it to the bottom of the, basically you're going underneath the clutch pedal. About the bottom 3/4 section is where it's going to wind up, and that's pretty much where they show it in the diagram on the factory manual. So you can get that so that doesn't interfere with your foot. Okay, so there you are, attached to your clutch pedal. I mean, you could just hook it there, but you're putting your foot on there, you probably wind up kicking the tape measure off. So it'd make a hassle. All right. Now the next step is to take a. If we come around to this side, you can see a little bit clearer. I'll move the camera over to the other side. Now, Ford says to use the inside seam of your steering wheel as your reference point. Now, as you can see right now, if we're looking here, the inside seam's about 24 1/8. Up here, I got definitely 24 1/4. So there's about an 1/8 of an inch variation. If you want to be a little bit more accurate, you make a cross here on a piece of masking tape and put the cross here right where your seam is. And as long as you don't turn the steering wheel while you're doing your measurements, up and down, you'll have a fairly accurate measurement. So here you go. Here I got roughly 24 3/16. Also, it's not really that critical. But anyway, so we'll hold the tape measure there. That's my reference point, and that's what we'll go by. Next, you start up your car as you normally would. Push the clutch pedal all the way down. Start the car. Now, it doesn't matter I move the steering wheel now. It matters when you're doing it, when you're actually taking your measurements. And it's the last, the measurements are at the final step. So, Now, while your clutch pedal is still down, you shift into reverse, but you stop halfway. So go from neutral to reverse and stop about halfway there. Now, slowly let up on the clutch. If the car goes backwards, you went too far. You're in reverse. Just go a little bit, then move it a little forwards. And then slowly let up on the clutch. You're not in neutral. Halfway between neutral and reverse. Slowly let up on the clutch. And now, what you've done is you've bypassed the reverse synchros. So you're not in a position that your gear shift normally would be in. You're halfway between neutral and reverse, but your transmission behaves as if it's in neutral. The next step you do is you pull on the shift lever towards reverse until you hear gear clash. Alright? And keep in mind, the gear shift, the lever's not in a position it normally is in, so you don't have to push over and back like you normally would to get into reverse. You're just pulling towards reverse because you're already halfway there. So just pull towards reverse until you hear the gear clash. Now, while you hear the gear clash, push down on the clutch. I'm exaggerating a little bit. You don't have to make that much noise, but I want to make sure you can hear it on the recording. And you push down on the clutch pedal while watching the tape measure until you stop hearing that gear clash. And about right there, I stop hearing it. And that's about 30 and, let's say, a little over 30 and 3/4. 30 and 13/16. Now, the next step, after you've you record that measurement. So 30 and 13/16. Then you put your car in neutral, doesn't matter. At this point now, you take one more measurement. Push the clutch pedal all the way to the floor. And you take that measurement. And I got, if I'm lucky,
30 and 7/8.
You take those two measurements, you subtract your first measurement from your second measurement, the difference there, you take the difference, and that is your clutch reserve. In this case, it's 1/16 if I'm lucky, barely. According to Ford, you should have 3/4 of an inch clutch reserve. Now, what does that mean? It means my clutch needs to be replaced. That's the test. That's all there is to it. Now, the truth is, if your clutch pedal like mine, if you got to push your clutch all the way to the floor to shift, which is the case with my car, obviously, it definitely needs to be replaced. But, you know, I'll do this test again when I put the new clutch in and see actually if I get 3/4 of an inch. That sounds like a lot. That's pretty good. They're saying that's what it should be. If it's less than 3/4, you should replace your clutch. That doesn't quite sound right to me, but that's what the Ford manual says. Anyway, that's all there is to it. That's how you would check your clutch reserve.